So I guess the big question right now with the prosecution's case wrapping up is if Trooper Michael Proctor will be called for the defense. What do you think?
I think they may want to call him because there's a lot of damning testimony they can get out of him. Probably not too much that he's going to add that will hurt the defense. So I think they likely will want him on the stand. I don't think the prosecution's calling him. I think they got all of their information out of Buchanan already. So it may be a good idea for the defense to call him and put a face with this name and kind of show what this investigation really entailed and who the lead on it was.
Now, there's been a lot of talk about Brian Higgins, Brian Albert. They all testified the first time around, but so far, not yet. Doesn't seem like the prosecution's going to call them. Do you think they'll be called by the defense?
I think they probably will. It's another situation similar to Proctor, where they're not going to add much that's going to hurt the defense, but they probably want the testimony from them about destroying cell phones, destroying SIM cards, driving them to naval bases, all these sort of things that were effective in the first trial that aren't coming out if the prosecution doesn't call them. Maybe you want to call them in your case and bring that stuff out in your case in chief.
And I know you touched a little bit on this in those answers, but why do you think the prosecution called them the first time, but not the second time?
I think there's different answers for different witnesses. And again, we have a different lead prosecutor in this case who's taken a different strategy with the way that he's handled the case moving forward. One of the reasons with Mr. Proctor, obviously, is now he's been terminated. So you don't want him to be the face of an investigation, knowing full well that it's going to come out that he got terminated for his behavior in this investigation. As far as Brian Higgins and Albert, I'm not sure what they would add to the prosecution's case at this point. And the decision probably is these guys are going to hurt us more than they help us. We don't need them. Let's not call them.
Now, what does the jury think? They're hearing about these people, but they haven't seen them. So are they just kind of imagining them? How does that impact a jury?
They're probably wondering, who are these people? What was their involvement? And I'm hearing their names. Why isn't the prosecution calling them? Are they hiding something? They're probably wondering who they are and why they're not coming in and telling their story about what happened. So I think they're very curious to hear from these folks.
Karen Reed had mentioned outside of court, she thinks this will be the last week of the prosecution's case. How long do you think the defense's case will take? She did mention that it would be a little bit longer with some more witnesses, more in depth. Last time it was really short. I was just looking back at it, and it was only a couple of days. What are you thinking this time around?
I think they may go a week, given the fact that they're going to be calling a lot of the same witnesses they called in the first trial. And as we just discussed, possibly calling some of those witnesses that the prosecution called the first time in their own case. So I think we're probably between 3 and 5 days for the defense's case in total.
Mm-hmm. And then yesterday, obviously there was some drama with the judge and having to talk to all the jurors individually at sidebar. And then 2 jurors did have to have their seats swapped in the courtroom. Is that typical, or is that something, what is your insight into that, I guess?
Not a typical thing that I see. The fact that she's bringing each juror to sidebar and having them question one by one, that's very rare. She was probably tipped off, or the court was tipped off, about some communication on the part of the jury, whether it's amongst them discussing the facts of the case or somebody saying, hey, I saw something on the news and bringing it up. Something tipped the court off that they may have a problem, and she needed to do an investigation into it. It's not something that happens normally, but this isn't a normal case. Normal cases don't have media coverage to the extent that this one does. So I'm not sure what happened there, but all 18 jurors are still in that box. Some of them have their seats swapped, but it seems like we're proceeding as if nothing happened that would lead to a juror being dismissed at this juncture.
And then, as this is probably the last week of the prosecution case, is there anything that stands out to you as a whole, or just in the last couple of weeks itself?
I think what we're seeing is a lot of questions about timelines. And Hank Brennan in his opening promised that he was going to depend on the cell phones matching up with the Lexus clock and the analytics surrounding these various technologies matching up to prove that Karen Reed was the perpetrator here. And I think we have a lot of questions about the science behind these timelines and where these numbers are really coming from. So I think that's been a problem for the prosecution in the last week or so. And once the defense makes their case, it's going to be very interesting to see how they can patch that together.
And do you think the jury's following along? I know there's been a lot of pieces of evidence. The glass, like they all had numbers, -7. How hard is it for a jury to be following along with this?
It's extremely difficult. There's a lot of information coming at them from pieces of evidence, numbers, technology, different clocks, different variances amongst the clocks. It's extremely confusing. And that makes closing arguments incredibly important because they're going to be looking to the attorneys to explain what this evidence meant and show them why they believe it either proves Karen Read's guilt or innocence.